On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences, and I focus in on helping companies get their messages out. And before we jump into today's message, I just wanted to play a quick announcement from our sponsor.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
So in this episode of Life Science Success, we're going to dive deep into the world of healthcare and health tech with Jim St Clair. He's the CEO of MyLigo. They're a startup revolutionizing patient-centric data solutions with over 25 years of experience across public and private sectors. Jim's going to share his insights on security, identity verification, AI-driven data exchange in healthcare, and critical importance of protecting patient identities. So with that, welcome, Jim.
Good morning, Don. It's great to be able to be with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And so just to share a little bit of information about yourself, could you tell us a little bit about your journey from being a naval officer to becoming CEO of a health tech startup?
Yeah, just to reflect on how old I am, I'll quote the line, "What a long, strange trip it's been." So I started as a naval officer in the previous century. Left active duty and worked primarily in government contracting and government consulting and public sector consulting. Got introduced through the public sector to the healthcare industry, working with CMS, VA, HHS, all at the federal level, and that in turn kind of honed my focus around healthcare, health IT, health tech. And so fast forward a few years and have been involved in a number of initiatives, either public sector or private sector, with more and more focus on health tech.
So did your past, with all of that, also influence kind of, where you're at today, as well as, how you think about health tech?
I would say absolutely, and I would say since we're in the world of startups, I have experience in some cases with small and very small government contractors, and the mindset to approaching business development and business growth. Obviously, there's a inordinate focus on this concept of fundraising and investment strategies to get early money to be able to build your product. The very first company that I worked for as a civilian leaving active duty was a 35-year-old family-owned company that had been built up from the owner's garage. And there were various strategies that they basically used for growth and development. What really started was, you generate revenue through contractual services. You use that revenue to continue to invest in the company and build from there in the true bootstrapping sense, until you have a $65 million company, and then they sold it off and retired. So there were a lot of kind of what I just say, kind of the tips and tricks of the trade within industries and consulting for building business and growing business that I've tried to carry over, at least in concept, to what we're doing, what I've been involved in, and then balance that with the environment around raising funds, investment strategies, equity, etc.
I mean, it's always interesting to hear people's stories that lead them, to the place that they're at today. With your experience in healthcare and finance and identity management, I feel like this sort of leads to MyLigo. So it's almost like, this journey is serendipitous now, but probably a very sort of tumultuous back and forth until you got to this point.
Absolutely, and I'd be quick to point out that what we're building at MyLigo is actually identical to another company that I worked with about 4 years. Was a wholly owned portfolio company as part of a large health system. And with the pandemic and the shifts in revenue and some of the challenges a lot of health systems faced with operations and operating costs, pandemic and kind of just post pandemic in 2021, they consolidated and basically absorbed a lot of the parts and pieces of their portfolio companies, and the one that I was working with was one of those. So our technology and our approach to the market, what we were trying to offer for patients and data, kind of lay dormant for the last couple of years. And then I had, quite frankly, the good fortune that a colleague of mine who was an investigator, principal investigator on a research project that was based on this technology at the University of Texas, contacted me and said, "Hey, we think we have an opportunity to really commercialize this. Would you like to lead it?" And I said, "Absolutely. It's really a chance, kind of at your point, to revisit everything that was kind of going right and not quite going right a couple of years ago, and now reinvest it with the leadership team and get the opportunity to take it in a new direction."
Yeah. So, what can you tell me a little bit about what are patient-centric data solutions, and then what is it that MyLigo is focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I apologize. Patient-centric data solutions, it does kind of sound, like a buzzword. But it is kind of challenging to address at a high level the kind of the underlying shift to patients managing their own healthcare data. And and that still remains kind of a guidepost to the future. I think there's been lots of years and lots of initiatives that have talked about patients managing their own data that have all been kind of fluffy pink clouds that we were somehow aspiring to. In 2020, 2025, my perspective is to offer that not just from some sort of concept of nirvana, but the fact that it is now societally on a global basis a necessity that has to be considered. And the argument can be made it takes 5 years or 10 years to start moving towards that sort of model where you're managing your healthcare data in the same way that you manage your finances and your bank accounts and other insurance information. But the underlying demographic changes in our healthcare system, the availability of physicians, the changes in the availability of hospitals, are really, in our perspective, demanding that we start moving to this. So our first step in doing that is the ability to firmly establish ID verification and patient identity that you as a patient can manage, which is very much in keeping with other international shifts towards national identity strategies and individual digital identity, and then associating that with your healthcare data. So if two hospitals that you rarely go to don't really know you as a patient and don't really have your data, it's falling back on the individual to be able to say who they are and what their data is and being able to guide their care.
Yeah, I don't know that this ties exactly to the example that you just gave, but my parents, my dad was really good at sort of collecting their health history. And one of the main things that I studied as I was finishing my PhD was the adoption of technology, by baby boomers. And there's a certain segment of people that grew up with pencils and paper, and getting them to convert to something digital is a very hard thing to do, right? Because I mean, I could pull out this thing at any time. It doesn't have an on-off switch. And by the way, it works 100% of the time. Why would I convert to something digital? I got to charge and I got to figure out and all that kind of stuff. So, but they used to take I used to sort of call it like their 3-inch thick binders to different doctors whenever they would move around. And quite often, doctors just, I mean, they would set the thing aside and just have a conversation with them about whatever they were there for, instead of going through anything that was in there. And it used to really frustrate my father because he would spend a lot of time, sort of making sure that this information was perfect. And And yet you kind of think about the fact that if you had it would be nice to have like a digital record that no matter what, no matter where you were, because of your ID, transition with you. And my hope would be then that somebody would actually leverage it whenever it could help them, understand me as a patient.
Absolutely, and it harkens back to my days on active duty, where you have a service jacket and you have a military record, and I can recall plenty of times. First of all, you were essentially responsible for your service jacket, and while there were people that helped maintain it and keep it up to date, it was an expectation that you would go through it and make sure that everything you wanted to see there was there and that the records were correct. And then to your example for your dad, I still have my manila folder in my medical record that anytime you had an appointment someplace, wherever you were, either you had it in your possession or you checked it out from, the ship's office or something like that, went to the doctor, they put some other piece of paper in it, and then you hand carried it back. So the skeuomorphism of having your own record is something that existed for decades that you just moved around. The real shift is that I think um, examples like your dad and others, that there are still folks that just say, well, I've seen the same doctor or I've gone to the same office for years, and they just have my information. And as we move to electronic health records, I think there was still a lot of mindset that an electronic health record is like an electronic version of your manila folder. And that's just not the case. We don't think about that in terms of data anymore. What we have to think about is healthcare data. And that data may come from something that you're wearing. It may come from your last visit to a doctor in the EHR. It may come from lab results that you had done completely independently, and how all of that is aggregated and who's responsible for aggregating it. If you go back 30 years, it was still you, even if it was pieces of paper in a folder.
Yeah, absolutely. And with regards to your website, so the MyLigo website says that 60% of hospitals risk losing patient identities due to data fraud. How does MyLigo address this issue?
Yeah, certainly. There was a really good survey done by HIMSS, the Health Information and Management Systems Society, a couple years ago, specifically around patient identity management from the perspective of how do healthcare organizations manage what they know and what they can verify about their patients. And it highlighted a number of challenges. And of course, what you pointed to was one of them. We are building a system using, quite frankly, some open source components that have been internationally deployed to give someone an electronic identity verification system that they control in their own mobile wallet, that can go through various types of verification processes to be able to prove and assert that you are who you are, and then using that digital credential to be able to demonstrate your identity when necessary at point of check-in or before healthcare is received. And then that is also associated electronically with your healthcare data, either in HR or at some other repository for verification purposes.
Can you also, I guess, elaborate a little bit more in terms of how you're using technology from around the globe, and how is it applied in healthcare?
Absolutely. So there are at least a dozen international efforts to develop digital identities. There's a whole lot of stuff that's written by United Nations Development Program, the World Bank, even here within the U.S., that is identifying the trend towards digital identity and using that to better enable people for better access. This is a challenge in the U.S., but there's this is a challenge in the U.S. as well. But just to highlight studies done by the World Bank, they say there's at least 1 billion people in the world that don't have the sort of identity attestation documents you and I do. There's no mobile driver's license. There's no established birth certificate. The point of this study is to highlight these are limiting people's ability to function in society, whether it's access to finances, mortgages, home loans, employment, and of course, access to healthcare. From a healthcare standpoint, of course, the biggest concern is that if I present myself for an appointment or I'm having a medical procedure, being able to say, yeah, we know exactly who you are and why you're here. That same survey that highlighted the identity fraud also called out the fact that there are a number of misassigned prescriptions or incorrect procedures because the verification that you were there to do A and you received B was a mistake that came about because they didn't accurately verify that you were the same person you were thinking of. And as I have discussed this with so many people, it's kind of been interesting because the very first reaction everybody understandably has is, well, what do you mean they don't know who you are? And I walk through the process of how electronic health information is managed and how your identity is managed within any particular health system or within an EHR. And it's like, well, it just seems like they should be able to know who I am. And I say exactly, but there are processes and procedures and technology that really haven't been addressed yet, quite frankly, until we came along, to make sure that as you go from place to place to place, there's a reliable, simple means to verify who you are and what your data is in doing
Yeah, and I I have to think as well, just in general, securing this data is going to become a bigger and bigger problem as we go along, right? I mean, it seems to me, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago, somebody had said, "Hey, look, AI has been used to try and figure out the next generation of cyber attacks on people," and I was like, as these people, leverage more and more technology, and we're leveraging technology to try and secure things. How do you sort of view this world now, because cybersecurity is much more central to what you've been working on. How do you approach the challenge of protecting patient data, in this era of ever increasing cyber attack?
Yeah, great question. So from an AI perspective, there are quite a few initiatives that are underway around securing AI, responsible AI. I participate in the coalition of healthcare AI, and we're working on guidelines and implementation recommendations for securing AI, and that's getting right into not just the securing the algorithms, but the environment that you're using AI in and the data that it has access to. Probably because I'm a bit older than a lot of participants, but I tend to look at it first and foremost as a network security issue and a data security issue. And then with regards to the way we approach it, there's been a very large initiative starting with the U.S. government and others around this concept of zero trust network architecture, which I fundamentally espouse. Well, zero trust means I don't trust you and you don't trust me. That means that the means for my proving my identity and my authentication to get access to something also means that you on the other end prove your authentication as well. So both parties agree in a trust framework to share information. This concept of zero trust and zero trust architecture really grew out of some of the cyber attacks like SolarWinds a couple of years ago, where they realized there had been flaws in the trust network that had been implemented at a large scale, and attackers were able to take advantage of that. So now they're moving to more of a model where there are continuous ways to verify and attest your ability to access something or share data with someone, and we're trying to build that in as part of our model.
It sure would be nice to see that applied on a more broad scale. I,
I would
I
agree with you 100%. We're here for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, with your experience with open data standards, how do you see the standards evolving in healthcare, and what role does MyLigo play?
Yeah, great question. So I've been involved with HL7 International in the U.S. and a couple other groups. They are basically the de facto healthcare data standards organization. Excuse me, and do a wonderful job. Volunteer-driven organizations, consensus-driven standards bodies to develop the standards that are used for what healthcare data formats should be to maximize interoperability and data exchange. Our solution leverages XML in the same way that the healthcare data standards organizations describe how data is exchanged right now. And the idea is to integrate our solution with your healthcare data to establish what they call provenance, which is basically the electronic means to verify that this data is associated with, an owner, you as the owner of your health data. And for our system to be able to support proving your identity and establishing your health data records in conjunction with health data standards that support that interoperability and data exchange. Within the healthcare industry, specifically here in the US, you have a lot of organizations called Health Information Exchanges, HIEs, and they sit at the state level, or there may be in the larger states multiple HIEs per state, and they act to broker information exchange where Hospital B has requested information from Hospital A. So we look to insert ourselves at a point where, as the Health Information Exchange is moving that data, you have an electronically verifiable means to establish the identity of the individual, say what their records are, and with a very high level of confidence, be able to offer to Hospital B the data from Hospital A.
Nice. Are there any particular milestones or innovations that you're particularly proud of with regards to where MyLigo currently is?
Yeah, great question. So I'm very excited about the fact that we expect to have our first proof of concept running in Texas in the early part of next year, and then kind of as an extension of our discussions of AI and ML and other work, we're beginning to grow our participation with precision oncology initiatives, where our identity solution and AI and ML engineering principles go into the concepts of digital twins to be able to assist with precision oncology solutions, where you have models of patient data that help guide decisions in oncology, radiology, chemotherapy, and those can be associated and managed by a patient with their own information. That's hopefully something that will continue to grow in Q1 of next year.
Interesting. And then, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing health tech industry today? And then, how is MyLigo positioned to address it?
Uh, yeah, I think that you could ask 3 or 4 different people about challenges in health tech, and it all offers similar answers, and certainly be accurate about challenges in funding or challenges with working with organizations, or the ability to monetize and generate revenue. I would offer our North Star is, as I was alluding to earlier, the challenges we're going to face in the industry over the next 10 years demographically, in terms of the number of clinicians and physicians that are available, the areas of the country that may or may not have continued access to care, the challenges around specialists, the role of clinician support in the way of physician's assistants and nurse practitioners, and how they'll fit into the equation to ensure that geographic areas still have coverage of some kind or specialty care. I think we need to be looking at things 5 and 10 years down, and then backing into, what are the challenges that we have in our industry now in order to face those or address those, and not just say, health tech challenges and startup challenges for problems for selling our solution next year.
Yeah. I mean, and it seems to me like there's a great need for adoption here, and unfortunately, I know the healthcare industry in general moves quite slow, right? So adoption is a very slow process across most of the industry, but in this case, whether it's protecting your information or giving better information to your providers, both sides are greatly needed even today. So my hope would be that we move a little quicker. The next few questions. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add real quick. I mean, I think everyone needs to pause and also say there is a degree of justification with the way that healthcare changes, and again, going back 25 years ago, working in a DoD environment, as we had what we were calling at the turn of the century the revolution in military affairs, and taking advantage of new technology and the concepts of changing how things are done. It started with a foundation that we approach security a certain way, and so things took a long time to be adopted, in many cases because they had to be demonstrated to be secure and reliable and resilient first. So as we have seen in many cases, you can't go rushing in to adopt a new technology. and then either find that there are challenges with its security or its reliability, which of course could be a patient safety issue, or that it isn't sustainable and causes problems later on.
Yeah, also true. So, next few questions focus in on you. What's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Gosh, it's so funny because I had a mentor when I first left active duty that was my boss at my first company, was himself a former officer. And in that first year or two together, there's a lot of just kind of guiding principles that I got from him that I still use, 20 years later. A couple of those just include, obviously trying to be a very good listener, the kind of the consultative art of working with clients and solutions, listening to their feedback, finding ways to be able to agree upon solutions and paths forwards as a way to do things simply. Also, just good advice in life about raising your kids and what the next step should be for how they go out into the world as citizens and not just as children. So yeah, in general, that's kind of the things we've gotten.
Very good. What
Yeah.
inspires you?
I think what inspires me is that we have a family of high utilizers in healthcare that have various challenges. So when I try and address these issues, when we look to new technology, when we're looking to things in the future to be able to move, there really is the ability to eat our own dog food. There is that taste test that we can do ourselves, which is, will it work for our household? Is this something we understand? Can I explain it to a family member? Can it make the way we receive healthcare and work more effectively? And give you a bit more immediate feedback as to the direction you're going, instead of promoting ideas that may be great or revolutionary, but you don't necessarily have a personal connection to. We have a personal connection to still needing to be able to get good healthcare now and in the future, and that helps kind of inspire what we're trying to do on a broader scale.
Very good. What concerns you?
What concerns me is whether or not we run out of sand in the hourglass. To your point about adoption, there are, as I said, for why things move slow, but then there are also a lot of problems with improper incentives and just cultural problems. Going back to the start of our conversation, my personal opinion is we have approached going to the doctor the same way we did the shaman 10,000 years ago. Fundamentally, we still don't think in terms of working within a healthcare system where we have not only the ownership and provenance of our own data, but also our healthcare outcomes and how we control our health going forward. And that creates challenges when, if you're relying entirely on some other party to manage your data for you and manage your outcomes without direct engagement on yourself, if something happens to that party, if they retire, if the hospital closes, et cetera, that's just gone. So moving that shift to say, hey, this is information that you can understand and better guide your own path forward in your own health, is going to create a lot more independence and self-sustainability that then make it easier. The dynamics of receiving healthcare are change.
Very good. And last question, what excites you?
I think what excites me is just the having the opportunity to revisit this and build the solutions at MyLigo, a couple years after having been involved with it the first time, seeing the changes in the environment, seeing how much more it's recognized as a needed solution and a path forward, having it aligned to things that are going on an international basis. And then, more specifically from an AI and ML perspective, how rapidly that technology is changing to be able to come up with new ideas for complementing and assisting in treatment, especially around oncology, and then more broadly managing your own health data. We're having much more serious conversations about AI agents and AI assistants and how those grow into things that be really AI assisted companions for you, for a loved one, as a caregiver, and managing that data and delivery care.
Won't that be a bright future? That will be exciting for sure. And yeah,
Yeah, and again, going back to that rosy clouds things, I do feel very strongly it is a future we have to have, not just be nice to have, because already just speaking as two guys down here on the Gulf Coast, The demographics within our own states are changing. The availability of healthcare is changing and will change more in the next couple of years. If we don't have an answer for it, we'll have a crisis. So, there's the shining hill in the future that we're trying to, a shining house on the hill in the future we're trying to get to, versus the real life challenges of things falling apart if we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jim St. Clair, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I appreciate you being here, and I do look forward to the future that MyLigo can bring to health tech and to patients, more broadly. So, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you very much, Don. It takes a village. It's great to be able to talk with your audience, and looking forward to collaborating to build these new solutions in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.